Freedom's greetings, Helldivers. Ervin here, bringing you the true Escalation of Freedom update for Buff Divers 2. The months of August and September have been extremely rocky for Helldivers 2 so far, with the escalation of our enemies alongside the de escalation of the player count. However, today is the day to turn the ship around and course correct towards a brighter future with the game utilizing a new strategy from Arrowhead. They've, instead of nerfing everything, decided to try out buffing everything, instead bringing us the wildest patch since the game's launch. There is an incredible amount to go over and cover today, but I'll be doing my best to give you all the information on the changelog, while also giving you my thoughts and analysis of how the changes will affect the game. With that out of the way, though, let's get into the patch. So, the first major change is the previously teased armor rework for our enemies. Armor used to reduce the damage received by 50% when the armor rating matched the penetration rating of your weapons. However, they felt this was too punishing and have decided to reduce this down to only 35% mitigation. This basically made every single breakdown I've ever made immediately wrong, as this was the core foundation of many breakpoints. Generally, every weapon in the game between the light penetration and light vehicle penetration tiers will feel significantly stronger just from this change alone, so this is going to take a lot of new testing rounds to nail down across the board, but generally, I am all for this change. The second major balance adjustment was a change I was very much hoping for, a reduction to the base amount of headshot damage received, down from 200% to 150% for Helldivers. They have also, unfortunately, spread this additional damage out throughout your limbs, basically meaning while damage will be less spiky when receiving headshots, you'll be taking generally more damage across the rest of your body. This has definitely improved the value of medium and heavy armors, especially the padded variants, as armor rating reduced headshot damage the least of all compared to the mitigation it granted to your limbs and body. This will once again require an entirely new round of testing and new How Armor Works video, as they've managed to torch that as well. But I will definitely work it all out and get it to you again soon. Now, on to primary weapon changes, of which we were promised an incredible amount, starting with the Liberator and Liberator Carbine, receiving some pretty significant buffs. The damage has been increased from 60 to 70, meaning it now hits some all important breakpoints, like Devastator 2-shot kills with headshots. And, with a change we will discuss later, it's now able to 2-shot kill Berserkers through the head. This gives it, on average, the same breakpoints the Tenderizer received recently, which made it one of my favorite weapons in the game for bots. So it's safe to say we are now living in a world of much more viable assault rifles. Hallelujah. Beyond just the damage, the durable damage was bumped slightly from 14 to 17. Stagger force increased from 10 to 15, which, important to note now, as this will come up a lot, 15 is the breakpoint for causing flinches on most enemies. This doesn't heavy stagger much of anything, so don't expect anytime you hear stagger 15 for it to be particularly beneficial. In fact, more often, it'll make it more difficult to land repeated shots on weak points due to all the flinching. These two weapons also received one more spare magazine, going from 7 to 8. Likely will unironically give the Liberator another spin after these changes. Not sounding all that bad now, but unfortunately, even with the Hunter's max health on its main body reduced to 160, these two rifles will not bring them down in less than 3 shots unless you hit the head. Between that and the lack of stagger and medium pen, I will not likely be utilizing these weapons for bugs. The Knight SMG, the quote unquote pay to win gun, has finally received a much needed buff, so it might actually do its first bit of winning. The damage was increased from 50 all the way to 65. The durable damage bumped ever so slightly from 5 to 7, and it now receives all its ammo back from resupplies, with a reduction to the overall recoil as well. Meaning not only will this weapon now also hit the 2-shot breakpoint on Devastator heads, but when utilizing its blisteringly fast full auto, you might empty the magazine with your wrist intact thanks to the recoil reduction. Overall, the Space P90 is now indefinitely more viable specifically for bots. Still not much here that would entice me to use it for bugs, however. The Liberator concussive changes, on the other hand, make it a support-based monster for any team. While the damage has stayed the same, it now has a 60-round drum mag, and I can't help but feel a bit sad that they've admitted they have Liberator drum mags, but decided this would be the only one they stick it on. Either way, with the extremely powerful staggering effect of the concussive, you can now support your team with it much easier, utilizing it for suppressing fire and lockdown for groups of enemies. They did, however, of course, reduce its maximum mags from 10 to 6, given the massive capacity increase. But this is still a change that has made the weapon, if nothing else, more interesting to bring while playing close to your team. The Tenderizer, having already received a recent massive buff and being plenty viable as a bot gun already, received a modest magazine capacity increase from 30 to 35. Overall, this improves its viability ever so slightly as a bug gun, especially considering it now easily passes the 2-shot kill breakpoint for hunter bodies. Overall, I will be at least glad to be doing just a little bit less reloading, as I already enjoyed this gun as it was. I can no longer joke about the Helldivers 2 Shot Breaker keychain having a pre-nerfed 16-round magazine. Use my referral link in the description below to purchase and support the stream through commissions today, as the Breaker has received its ammo back now once again sporting 16 rounds, as well as yet another modest stagger increase from 10 to 15. Do I think the Breaker is back in the meta? No, but I think people will probably play it a lot more than they were last patch. The spray and pray now has a duckbill muzzle, causing it to now have a much more horizontal spread than vertical, making it much more consistently useful for horde clear. This is especially true thanks to its bird shot being buffed from dealing 12 damage per pellet up to 15, making the total damage across all 16 pellets up from 192 all the way to 240. With these changes in mind, you can likely view this weapon as a much more reasonable competitor to the Incendiary Breaker for chaff clearing dominance than it was previously. The scythe, as we saw in the blurry balance stock, now cools down faster and unfortunately now has the 25-meter scope, not the ACOG.JPEG we were hoping for. The recoil that was already almost non-existent has been reduced, and the burning effect buildup increased. These changes will make this weapon a more viable bug gun, as chaff on the Terminid front can barely survive a single burn application, and none should survive too. Couple this with a lower overall cooldown period, and you have a much more consistent pseudo-infinite ammo chaff slayer. The crossbow, as we expected from the blurry dock, has indeed received a 50% increase to its explosive radius, going from a 2 to 3 meter inner and 4 to 6 meter outer radius increase. The explosive damage, however, is not increased from 150 to 300, but all the way up to 350. The crossbow will now function as an insanely good crowd clearer on top of being one-handed, able to kite extremely well, on top of pairing with a ballistic shield as a fantastic frontlining weapon capable of heavy stagger and one-shotting heads on devs, and on top of destroying spawners. This weapon just can't and won't stop winning the patch notes. Speaking of winning the patch notes, though, next up is the Eruptor. The Eruptor has shrapnel once again, discharging 30 pieces of shrapnel on impact, dealing 100 damage per piece with an armor penetration of just 2. The explosion, in lieu of this now additional potential 3,300 damage to targets around the blast area susceptible to light pen, has been reduced down from 340 to 225 damage. Doubling down on the area of effect value of the weapon, however, the radius of these explosions has been boosted by an overall 33%. Generally, you can expect your Eruptor to be way stronger than it was last patch in the majority of situations. The Eruptor was a beast at clearing crowds of Terminids, especially last patch, and now you can expect it to do much the same, but for a slightly different reason. Also worth noting here, the belly armor of the Charger has been reduced to 2, so firing the shrapnel underneath the Charger will once again do quite a lot of damage. The Defender has received a pretty modest buff, going from 70 damage per round to 75, and durable damage from 7 to 8. Interestingly, I can't think of many breakpoints or any really off the top of my head this now reaches, so outside of longer effective ranges, this weapon is not likely to feel any more powerful than it did last patch despite this buff. The Liberator Penetrator received an insane 33% damage buff, and by that I mean it now deals as much damage as the base Liberator used to do. Between this buff and armor penetration, meeting armor being increased from 50% to 65% damage, you can now expect the Liberator Penetrator to actually be a pretty serviceable answer to medium armored enemies such as Biospheres and Devastator chestplates, while also taking down lightly armored high durable enemy parts like Alpha Commander heads in a more respectable number of shots. Far from the best, but this gun unlocks super early, and it's at least not a total joke now. Speaking of unlocking early, the Diligence got a pretty massive glow up, going from 125 to 165 damage alongside a durable bump from 32 to 42. This weapon will now hit the all-important one-shot kill headshot breakpoint on both Berserkers and Devastators, not to mention one-shot kills on Hunters to the body. Without early the diligence unlocks in Helldiver's career, this weapon is now a fantastic option for the bots and a serviceable bug gun, especially for newer players just working their way through the first war bond. Honestly, pretty stoked to take this weapon for a spin today. The counter sniper, its big brother on the other hand, has received 60 extra damage, up to 200 per bullet, a durable damage increase from 14 all the way to 50, which is just incredible, and a stagger force increase from 15 to 20, which unfortunately will likely only flinch targets with no heavy staggering effect, making it more difficult to hit those follow-up shots on targets than before, with no real benefit, although I could be wrong here. The 200 damage and 25% durable damage does now mean this weapon has significantly better sub breakpoints, such as the TTK for Devastator's legs, backpacks, and torsos, and can be used to destroy gunships potentially, as well as Strider Chinling guns much more viably than before. The higher durable damage also makes this weapon strangely just ever so slightly more viable against medium bugs, but it's still likely not what you want in a loadout over there. The counter sniper was already my favorite bot gun before, so while the buff didn't feel the most necessary, I'll definitely take it. Speaking of my favorite weapons, though, the Blitzer now builds up a modest stun effect. I'm actually glad this wasn't too crazy. You are unlikely to see this effect build up on anything smaller than a Spewer or Devastator, but the heavy stagger of the weapon is still very much active. The Blitzer was the strongest bug stomper last patch and will likely continue to hold that position now with an even stronger crowd controlling potential against those medium targets. The Torture now deals 50% more damage, raising from the anemic 200 DPS to 300 DPS and durable damage, making its raw damage far more viable than it was previously. The Flamer mechanics have also been reverted to the pre-escalation of freedom status, and it's now the first primary weapon in the game to have light vehicle penetration, or AP4. The Flamer mechanic revert now also means you can torch heavy units such as Chargers and even Hulks with this weapon through their armor. And the high durable DPS means it's now a pretty ammo efficient medium and heavy slayer in its own right from the primary position. This is definitely not a weapon to sleep on, especially with the gas weapons releasing in 2 days, which will combo absurdly well with it. The dagger now gains heat more slowly, has no recoil at all, and deals 50 more damage per second, up from 200 to 250. Thankfully, that's still less than the torture, so that meme has died and sets enemies on fire faster, similar to the scythe. As far as infinite ammo sidearms go, can see the extra 25% DPS making it feel a mark better as a head popper from behind the personal shield during the bot engagement, so there is probably some real potential in this sidearm now, if I'm being honest. Lastly, for the sidearms, the Crisper has of course also received the Flamer 50% DPS increase, raising from 300 damage per second to 450 damage per second. With the Flamer mechanic reversion and an armor penetration increase to 4 from 3, the Crisper is now the first sidearm capable of slaying tank class enemies with a durable DPS of 450. The only question is if the magazine capacity will allow you to do so. If it does, this weapon is now an absolute beast of a sidearm capable of dishing out the hurt to Chargers, Hulks, Spewers, and more, which is just insane. All right, we made it to the support weapon changes. A lot of you were very worried in the comments of my railgun short that anti-tank would be becoming useless thanks to the insanely powerful railgun buffs. But Arrowhead has made sure this isn't the case by turbo buffing the damage of this class of weapons. The spear now deals 4,000 damage. The recoilless rockets, queso beam, and patriot rockets now all deal 3,250 damage. And commando rockets now deal, I'm not sure, but I want to say I heard 2,000 damage. They didn't include the numbers in the notes, unfortunately, only in the video. But yes, generally expect anti-tank weapons to anti-tank now. No more than a couple shots will drop every ideal target in the game, and they can now also be used to destroy fabricators from any angle in general, due to them now having a health pool. This, of course, does mean the commando no longer one-shots them, but two shots. But this also means the other anti-tank weaponry is not left out of this party and can do the same. So in summary, expect the spear to one-shot the targets you hit regardless of weak points. Expect the recoilless, EATs, and queso beam to one-shot targets to weak points, or sometimes just to the body as well, depending on their size, and otherwise take them out in 2 rounds to the body maximum. And you can also expect the commando to do this generally in 1 to 2 hits to the weak points, as well as 2 to 3 shots to the body, depending on what it is. These changes make the anti-tank line more than just usable. This makes them absolute beasts, railgun buff considered and all. The grenade launcher has had its maximum magazines increased from 2 to 3 with a slight radius increase. I don't expect this to really change how the grenade launcher is viewed in the metagame, especially with the crossbow interrupter doing much the same as this weapon from the primary position does. But it's a nice little buff all the same. The laser cannon, like the other lasers, now cool down faster, has no recoil, sets enemies on fire faster, making it generally stronger than last patch. But the changes to enemy armor and weak points will also see the laser cannon into a state of being a viable option for dispatching tanky targets such as Bio Titans, Chargers, and Hulks through the body if necessary for a much more powerful indirect buff. Now, the Arc Thrower has received such a massive buff, it could potentially be the patch winner, especially considering the cult following the weapon had before its half charging tech was removed. The range has been increased to 55 meters, allowing it to now hit flying units like gunships and shriekers. It now builds up a stun effect on anything that it can penetrate, so any enemy in the game besides Titans and Factory Striders can now be stunned and left helpless by the Arc Thrower. And the durable damage was doubled from 50 to 100. Considering it also got even more jumps per strike, the Arc Thrower is now likely the absolute peak of crowd controlling weaponry in Helldivers 2, and a welcome addition to any composition for its S tier lockdown capable of making any enemy somewhere between deleted and helpless after just a couple zaps. Ah, yes, it's now time. The best gun is Railgun, because there's no gun like Railgun. It has indeed had its durable damage increased at a baseline from 60 all the way to 225, with an incredible 250% maximum damage when fully charged at 2.9 seconds. This brings its maximum damage up to 1500 ballistic and 562 durable damage at a maximum penetration level of 7. The railgun against enemy heavies is now viable across the board when it comes to weak points such as Bile Titans, tanks, cannon turrets, and chargers, on top of already taking down Devastators, Hulks, and gunships. The railgun is now in the space musket of your dreams, able to Swiss Army its way across the galaxy as an all purpose, fantastic support weapon option. The Stalwart, not wanting to be even weaker than the Liberator, has had its damage increased to match at 60 up to 70 damage per bullet, hitting no notable new breakpoints. Beyond Devastator's 2-shot headshot kills, anyway. A durable damage bump from 14 to 17 and a stagger increase from 10 to 15, which is quite insignificant. I would not expect the Stalwart to feel much better than it did last patch. The machine gun has had its stagger adjusted from 15 to 20, which is thankfully enough to start seeing some heavy stagger on the chaff tier units for some overall more relevant crowd control. Overall, a decent change, but nothing crazy compared to the majority of this patch. The anti-material rifle's durable damage was increased from 135 up to 180 per shot, with a staggering force increase from 20 to 25, making it less punishing to body shot Devastators and Hulks even now that their armor has been reduced, as they'll heavily stagger, unable to fight back anytime you land a body shot. The anti-material rifle was in a good spot before the patch, and it'll find itself in an even better one, now sporting overall slightly better breakpoints, a wider range of effective targets thanks to the enemy armor reductions, and less punishing use cases thanks to that heavy stagger. The heavy machine gun has had its stagger also increased from 20 to 25, making it a crowd control monster, heavy staggering anything smaller than a Hulk into a non combative scrap heap. Couple this with the enemy armor changes, and this weapon has well and truly made its way into the top of its class. Did I say staggering anything smaller than a Hulk? I meant staggering anything a Hulk or smaller. Yes, it stagger locks Hulks now. The Commando, as I said, can no longer one-shot the Fabricators due to having its demolition force reduced, but will still destroy them in 2 rockets, thanks to them now having a health pool. While this change was probably seen coming, considering other launchers can now do this trick themselves and the other launchers all have typically better breakpoints against heavies now, you're not likely to actually see a lot of the Commando this patch, far less than last at any rate. The flamethrower has had its damage increased by 33%, going from 600 DPS to 800 DPS, both standard and durable damage. The flame mechanics were reverted, and its armor pen increased by 1 up to 4. Essentially, the flamethrower, torture, and crisper have always been the same weapon with different tick rates and damage. This is still true, so the flamethrower is back and better than ever, toasting chargers like marshmallows in seconds, just like it did pre-escalation of freedom. On top of some news tricks, able to roast the bottom out from under a Titan as really any weapon can now. torch the face-off impalers rapidly, and even cross the streams with hulks. As a huge flamethrower enjoyer from pre-escalation of freedom, I'm extremely happy to have this weapon back in its original state, but even better than ever. Now, we do have a few grenade changes to go through before we get into the gameplay features and enemy changes. The frag grenade has had its shrapnel increased from 80 to 110 damage per shard. You get 5 of them now instead of 4, and now get back 3 from refills. The grenade has also had its radius increased to match the new eruptor. Considering these grenades are basically fired off every time you fire an eruptor, if a frag is something you wanted, there is no reason to not get it from the eruptor instead, as even with 5 of these grenades, you're unlikely to be satisfied with the results. The only merit of this grenade is that you can now bring it specifically as a nest closing grenade, as getting 5 of them means one more nest or fabricator closed per resupply than other grenades, which is at least a nice little niche to keep in mind. If you're early game in Helldivers 2, you might want to bring frags if you find yourself needing some extra nest clearing devices. Thermites are booming big, with their explosive ending increased from 100 damage up to 2,000 points of damage dealt to the surface it's stuck to. They also will begin burning quicker and explode slightly sooner, making these anti tank grenades actually anti tank. Literally, one of these now kills a tank. You only get 3 of these now, but considering how unapologetically garbage they were when you had 4 compared to how incredibly powerful they are as an anti tank grenade now, I don't think many will be complaining about this reserve nerf. Now, likely the most important buff of all, the player now has an emote wheel where they can place up to 4 emotes from their collection on it and use it at any time. They've also fixed the bug where you get stuck in the animation after using an emote. Both of these were on my Christmas list, so I am super happy to finally rock all my favorite emotes and taunts at once within the game without having to choose just one. All right, the enemy changes. As I covered in the weapons section, automaton fabricators now have health and can be broken down through their health pool by any anti tank weaponry with an armor penetration level of 6 or greater. This does also mean that the railgun can technically break fabricators now. But given the massive disparity in damage and durable damage between the railgun and the new anti tank weapons, I wouldn't ever bother doing this, as it's likely to run you a lot of ammo to do so. All versions of the Hulk have had their main armor around their body reduced from 5 down to 4, making all light vehicle penetrating support weapons and even the flamer weapons deal damage to them through the body. The trade here is the back weak point is now a little bit more durable and has 200 more HP up to 1,000. Honestly, this change is a bit of a wash for most weapons, although it is notable that the autocannon and AMR will now stagger Hulks when chipping away at the body trying to get a bead on the headshot, something that'll make stun grenades feel far less necessary when running these two weapons. The Hulk Bruiser has had its rocket launcher replaced with a secondary energy cannon, cutting down on the amount of rockets flying at you at any given time, and adding some much needed counterplay to the enemy, given they had a tendency to creep up on you, making very little noise, knock you over with a rocket, and then finish you with the laser. A still very dangerous enemy, but likely a more fair one with this change. Be careful though, because like I said, those lasers deal a ton of damage all the same. The tank's front armor has been increased from 5 to 6, likely to make them a little bit more distinct from the new Barrager tank that had become the decisively tankiest tank on the bot front. This doesn't mean too terribly much for any weapon besides the railgun, which will have to reach its final charging stage in order to damage them, now taking 2.5 seconds when firing at the front plates. Berserkers have had their health reduced from 150 to 125 on their heads, allowing most any weapon in the game besides the concussive and penetrator to take them out in just 2 headshots. Their main health was reduced from 1,000 down to 750, and their glowing abdomens are now true weak points as I originally thought they were, making it the ideal target for most weapons while they are bobbing their heads at you too quickly to take out through that weak point. The chainsaws now do an absolutely lethal amount of damage, of course, but overall Helldivers are likely to run into less frustration when it comes to dispatching groups of berserkers with any weapon of their choice now. All versions of the Devastator have had their main health reduced from 800 to 750, and allegedly have had their aim worsened due to flinching when hit, which will hopefully make firefights with heavy Devastators less one-sided for weapons only capable of flinching and not heavy stagger. Beyond this, the Rocket Devastators now only have 3 volleys of rockets available before needing to trigger a reloading animation, of which they only get 1 of. The collision detection of small rockets has also been reduced, making it much easier to dodge them as it's now 80% smaller. Both of these changes also extend to the gunships as well, which will also have a limited supply of rockets with reduced collision. This change will likely be well received by the majority, even if I don't personally feel it was a necessary one. I can't say it won't feel nice, though, not being stuck in an eternal loop of dodging rockets from gunships while trying to get to my support weapon. All chargers have had their armor reduced from 5 to 4 across their entire body, as well as had their butt weak point made less durable and belly armor reduced from 4 to 2. This means not only are light vehicle penetrating support weapons viable against them, but just about any primary can take them out through the rear if needed, on top of anti tank mines actually killing them in just one mine. If this wasn't enough, they now have a 300% damage multiplier whenever their main body has lost its armor, turns slower, and charges less often, inviting too many new ways to count when it comes to killing these things effectively. To compensate these incredible nerfs to the Charger, you should keep in mind that charges it does perform are now incredibly deadly, having received a 50% increase in all attack damage. Nice to see the Charger take some nerfs for once, instead of every weapon capable of taking it out effectively taking the nerfs. Hunters have had their health reduced from 175 down to 160. This modest change improved the viability of both DMR weapons, as I said, as well as made it even more susceptible to fire damage over time, only having 10 more health than a full burn duration inflicts. They are all but guaranteed to die now when crossing walls of flames. Overall, pretty solid nerf to this bastardized grasshopper. The scavenger's health was reduced to 60 from 80, meaning every weapon in the game can now one-shot them to the body. I don't think there was anything that made a gun feel worse against the bugs than being tanked by the most insignificant termite the enemy had to offer. Not to mention taking the peak physique passive now allows you to one-shot melee these little guys with a non-headshot. The one and only breakpoint the 50% melee damage increase now grants. Worth. Bile Titans had their carapace armor reduced to level 4 from 5 and now have a new separate health pool beneath their belly sacks. Once destroyed, the inner belly is now only light armor down from level 4 armor, allowing any weapon in the game to damage them through this weak point. The health pool is now separate from the main body's 3500, making it much more realistic for small arms to destroy. And should this new health pool fall to 0, the Titan will die, inviting an infinite amount of possibilities when it comes to removing this threat, no longer limited to using anti-tank weaponry or stratagems when it comes to dealing with these guys. Similar to how Hulks have always been. There is now much more interaction when it comes to combating Titans. Impalers have also had their shells cracked down to just armor 4 from 5. The distance you are pursued by the tentacles has also been reduced, and they'll take less damage before being forced to retract. Just be careful because the tentacle damage has been increased to compensate when you do get hit. Similar to the other heavy bug enemies, Impalers are now removable by just about any weapon in the game with the right application of ordnance, which, in my opinion, is always a good thing. Most importantly, though, the Impaler space program has been shut down. You should no longer be launched by the tentacles receding while standing in front of the Impaler, resulting in your game becoming soft locked. Finally. Next, I want to mention that the main health pool of every heavy enemy in the game has had its health increased to bring the anti tank weapons into a class of their own for dealing with them. This will widely not affect the usage capabilities of non anti tank weaponry that you're already used to dispatching heavies through weak points with. This change was made so that only the anti tank weapons would feel comfortable removing heavy targets by hitting them in any location on the body. This was a good move on Arrowhead's part, as it keeps the anti-tank weapons at the top of the shelf when it comes to heavy removal convenience, while allowing all other weapons in the game to still participate in various amounts. Along with this change, they've of course had to make adjustments to all anti-tank class stratagems, boosting their damage alongside, as they, like the anti-tank weapons, needed to maintain their identity as heavy clearing stratagem options. I don't have hard numbers for you yet, but you can be rest assured that I will be getting my hands on them and talk about them very soon. On the less vague side of the changes, the 500k G bomb does in fact now boom big, because big booms should boom big, which all of you seem to agree on. The Gatling Sentry and Machine Gun Sentry have had their stagger improved to cause heavy stagger to light units, further improving their chaff clearing and crowd controlling capabilities, which is solid. The Tesla Tower now not only heavy staggers like the Blitzer and Arc Thrower do, but stuns enemies as well, just like the Arc Thrower. Considering the Tesla Tower now has the armor penetration to tag chargers, it's likely going to see fantastic use cases against the Terminids as long as you manage to keep Bile Titans away from it. Staggering and stunning up chargers while dispatching all chaff in its vicinity The Tesla Tower is now likely far more than just a meme on the Eastern Front. The heavy machine gun emplacement now has a heavy stagger with 25 stagger force and can be used to great effect when it comes to killing just about anything in the game. No longer will you be forced from your seat just because an enemy you couldn't deal with spawned in. Wait, tanks are still class 6 armor. Never mind, run. The Patriot exosuit has had its Gatling stagger improved from 15 to 20, allowing it to heavy stagger chaff enemies. But more importantly, those wrist rockets pack a mean punch, able to drop a Bile Titan or Charger in just one shot to the head. The Emancipator mech has also had its anemic 60 durable damage on its cannons beefed up to 150 per round, with a 30% fire rate increase and a 33% ammo increase, now sporting 100 shots per arm. It's safe to say, Mech Warrior is back, everybody. Our mechs are now primed for combat once again and now fully worth dropping into combat with your loadout slots. The orbital gas strike is an important one with a new war bond on the way. They've adjusted gas to be more crowd control focused, an idea I'm a big fan of considering mixing gas and fire together was always going to be the best combination for the new stratagems. Gas will now blind and confuse the enemy, functioning much like an inverse smoke grenade or pocket sand, making it incredibly useful for controlling the enemy's movement while you burn them down using your other stratagems and weapons while still doing a moderate damage over time effect. I'm very glad they did this, as the gas war bond would have otherwise just been fire, but slightly better in every way. Making a distinction between these two damage over time effects was a very necessary play. We've now reached the fixes category, and oh, how many fixes there were. So let's go through the most notable ones. Evacuate high value assets is now once again a playable mission without instant fail states outside your control. Enemies will no longer spawn on top of the extraction point. They can no longer shoot the generators from far away. And the heavy and flying enemies now prioritize Helldivers over generators when it comes to targeting. Looking at you, Factory Strider and Barrager. This should make this mission feel a lot more tolerable, so that maybe we will start winning bot defense operations as people once again want to play this mission type. The Bile Titan head bug has been fixed, so you'll be dealing full damage to them no matter their animation state yet again. Hooray! The extra head and egg spawns have been removed from super outposts as they were never intended to be there, which is good as taking more than one of these out on the mission would delete all rewards from the mission instead of resulting in great rewards. Still think these need to be attached to a new weapon customization currency, but I'll let them cook with the currency rework that's coming up. They fixed just one instance of enemies shooting through walls. Many more to go, likely. But I'm a fan of my hardcover functioning, so we will take this W. They have once again removed the infinite grenade glitch accessed by swimming in water. We will see how many hours it takes for the community to cook up a new way to do this, or if they finally squash this one for good. They fixed the 500 kg explosion, sometimes not triggering, which explains a lot. And most importantly, General Brash's democratic values have been increased by 1000%. Something I'm sure my father was so proud about, he had to have it included in the notes, and for good reason. That's a lot of values, Dad. Overall, the Buff Divers patch to me seems like an absolute win for the players. We are going to see levels of build diversity never seen previously. There are just so many more viable weapons, strategies, and ways to play the game than there were yesterday. It is mind blowing. There are, of course, concerns this has made the game easier, and they are justified. But it's important to keep in mind the game was also at its hardest that it's ever been, as new enemies have been added in over time, while we've stayed much the same for some time now. If anything, this has likely brought the scales back closer to the game's original difficulty. And for those of us who have enjoyed the previous escalation of challenge, it's important to remember Helldivers 1 had 15 difficulty levels, and there are plenty more new enemies on the way for us to combat as the game continues to escalate ever further into the future. So, in my opinion, despite being someone who has only played the highest difficulty the game has to offer, I think this change is one for the better. It's more important that the majority of Helldivers enjoy the game than for me to feel particularly challenged by the game. So I'm more than okay waiting for our enemies to continue escalating in order to match our new power scale. Hopefully, this patch is the path Arrowhead intends to stick to, and they keep Pilestead away from any further vacations, at least until next year, considering they don't seem to be able to get anything done without him around. That'll be it for me, though, as I'm off to dive in and start plucking away at all the new data. Thank you for watching till the end, and have yourselves a wonderful day. I'll see you next time.